Oh, look, it's time for Wednesday's Bring It In Troops, little Zoom from quarantine show. Today, rescheduled for Monday, the great Tom Haberstroh. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
You're in another new location.
Yeah, I'm in Westport, Connecticut. I am at the family office, and I am looking at some deer grazing on the riverbed here, the Saugatuck River, and it is beautiful. And I'm visiting family. It's been a beautiful time here the last 3 days. It has not been beautiful for the NCAA here against the Supreme Court justices.
Oh,
Apparently,
what a
man.
segue.
Right now it's happening, and it just seems like all of the NCAA's walls are crumbling as we speak.
I didn't see much, but I saw like Clarence Thomas asked if they were similar efforts to control coach compensation.
Yikes. Like, how do you have an answer for that? You can't.
Well, first, you're just shocked he asked the question to begin with. That's the first time to pick your jaw off the floor.
Yeah, Gabe Feldman is right to put the parentheses exclamation. Like, that is definitely an appropriate time to put the parentheses exclamation point.
Yeah. I mean, by the time this happens, it feels like the fix is in, right? It's done. Like the NCAA is getting blown up in some way as we speak, right? Is that the bet?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the G League Elite, the team that was basically born out of the idea that some of these athletes want to get paid and aren't willing to go through the NCAA and would rather get NBA coaching, developmental NBA coaching, and get paid while doing it. And the idea that this isn't work and they're poking holes at the amateurism idea from all the quotes that I'm seeing from the Supreme Court is that, like, are you trying to tell me that people only tune into March Madness because they're unpaid? Like, the unpaid part, the amateurism part, that they're not getting compensated for their work, that is the reason why people are tuning in? Or is it just because basketball is really fun or sports are really fun to watch? And I'm reminded, like, I don't listen to like Jackson 5 or hear like Michael Jackson as a kid and being like, music's good, but I just worry about him being paid. Like, I'm never thinking like the music isn't as good if the person on the other end of that microphone is being compensated fairly. Like, if you're amazing at your job, and these athletes are amazing at their job, and it is a job, they should be compensated.
Of course. But Tom, I think, like, I feel like, but do universities have to be involved? Right? Like,
no.
This is the problem, right? I think there is a lot of value to universities and conferences in a myth that they're just students, right? So, like, if you're, I didn't go to a really basketball school. NYU doesn't really.
I'll explain it to you.
Neither did Tom.
At Wake Forest,
At
Wake Forest, there was a class called football physics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It wasn't actually called football physics, but everyone knew this was the physics class that the entire football team is going to take. And therefore the curriculum and the syllabus were super easy and you can get an easy A. And so it was at Wake Forest. I'm sure this happens at tons of other schools, is that there are classes to make sure that the athletes put in as much time in the classroom and as much time on the playing field, making a lot of money for the boosters in the program. And like the whole class education thing, like, talk to Kentucky, talk to a bunch of big time schools about what happens when those one and done players are done with their basketball season, how many classes they go to after that. Just ask them. And it's just set up that way. It's just set up for them to play basketball. That is their major. And we act like it's really all about education, student athlete. No, it is absolutely athlete for a lot of these guys.
And so I think there's, like, at every big time sports program event, there's some very, very nice cars, and they're very successful, like, lawyers and bankers, and who give a lot of money to the university, even build stadiums and stuff. But in the Michael Jackson anecdote that you gave, the university doesn't get squat. I think that's what I feel like that hinges on. Like, me, successful banker, I went to Wake Forest. I feel like Tim Duncan inside when I watch him play. Let me give you 10 mil, right? But if Tim Duncan's getting 50 grand that year, maybe in the G League a little, Wake Forest doesn't need anything from me, right? Like, I'm not writing a check for Tim Duncan in the G League. And so I feel like that's where the NCAA has this kind of impossible, they have to cling to this amateurism thing, is because it motivates boosters.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch the games yesterday. Coach, did you watch them? Because, I mean, the score from the Michigan game looked like it was a first quarter in the NBA.
It was, they shot, Michigan and UCLA shot a combined 24 threes Gonzaga, one of the best teams of all time, in theory, they're 2 games even going undefeated and they're loaded. They shot 21 in a game they won by, it was never close, and they still took 21. They're playing modern basketball. The UCLA Michigan game, and I love Juwan Howard. Don't get me wrong, I love him, but it looked like he was coaching the way he played in the 90s. And I saw them beat my team the game before, and they made a couple of nice adjustments in the second half, especially, and they executed. In this game, it was just ISO, ISO, ISO. UCLA, that coach never sits down, never shuts up, overcoaches every second. And I had to turn the volume. I couldn't bear to stand it. It was nauseating, and it was awful basketball. People, I'm sure, tune in because, for lots of reasons. But yeah, I'm on your side a lot of this. I will say this: the G League has no monopoly on development, and neither does the NCAA. The reality is, certain people that work for certain franchises and or universities do have that ability. And the rest are flying blind and faking it. And so there's lots of different ways to solve this problem. It just, you first had to recognize there's a major problem here. There's a complete hypocrisy. And I like your point too, amateur, because having coached many players from all the schools you see, the biggest schools, I've coached national champions, the whole thing. Some of them played for men and or women. In other words, women were head academic advisors, and they actually had to do their studies. Like, it meant something. Didn't mean they didn't have help, right? Most of them didn't, right? Yeah. Most of them didn't. And I've had multiple cases with very famous coaches where when having to choose between going to class for a test, like a real test, not football physics. In one case, it was real physics. Or going to practice, and the practice they got kicked out of practice and brought back hours later. And that's how the coach got around the rule of 20-hour work weeks, is you got kicked out of the first one after an hour, and they started the clock over. And when they rescheduled it, he had a test that afternoon because that's when you took your test, because you practiced in the morning on those days, whatever. He was told you have to come to practice. And he called me. He's like, Coach, I can't miss this physics test. It's hard. I don't want to take the makeup. Yeah. And he got yelled at for missing the test. Like, I know what a scam it is in many respects.
Physics wasn't just a bad choice, though, right? Like, come on, physics is hard.
Right. No, this guy, happy to say, multimillionaire, businessman, super smart. He academic All-American 4 straight years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was there for school, and he would have been a first-round pick if he didn't get injured a bunch. Like, Dean Smith visited him twice at North Carolina. He was a big-time player. He took it seriously. Most of these guys, understandably so, basketball is their passion, it's their livelihood. It's going to be their livelihood. They want to do it all the time. And in college, you're limited to some degree. 20 hours a week is all you can do on the court, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Actually, not the worst time to bring up this Russell Westbrook quote. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it.
I love it.
It's a whole thing with Stephen A. Smith. You probably already know about it, but he ended up saying last night, I watch these college games and I watch these kids and these announcers, man, they get on the TV and just say anything about a kid. They don't even know him. They don't know his family. They don't know where he's from. They don't know what he's been through. They don't know his troubles. They don't know his pain. They don't know anything about the kid. But one thing said on TV can determine how you perceive this kid on TV, which will allow him to be able to reach his goals, which will allow him not to be able to get drafted, which will allow him not to take care of his family, which will now not create generational wealth, which now makes our people and the minorities, underserved communities. This is way bigger than basketball. That's my entire life focus. How about that?
Yeah, he wow. Not only is he just balling out on the court and putting up ridiculous numbers, but those quotes are I think part of this is I think social media and the platforms that these players have now have broken down the walls and been more transparent now in today's era than they were before. So 20 years ago, you could talk about these players as if they're just characters on your TV screen. Can't do that anymore. Like you have to, I mean, you should have been doing it a long time ago, considering them as human beings. But what Russell Westbrook is getting at is the whole ethos about like, we are human beings and we're dealing with stuff. And so when we miss a shot at the end of the game, it's not a reflection of our character. It's not a reflection that we're soft. It's not a it could just be, I got some really bad news. I'm an 18-year-old in a big moment. And I got some really bad news. My head's not in the right place. And like, I'm going through it. And the power that some of these commentators have to create narratives in make it easy for fans watching the game to understand a very complex game. They have so much power to frame what a prospect is, or if he's good enough, or if he's man enough to take it to the next level. I think about like Adam Morrison after his shot at Gonzaga and cries on the court and then just does nothing in the NBA. And I'm reading a story about him years later and how he's just I don't know if it was that shot, but how just his life was just turned upside down going into the NBA. And the idea that one shot at the NBA, at the NCAA level, can be dictating so much of your life on and off the floor. You forget that these are human beings and they're teenagers most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love when players cry. Like, that's one of the first things I ask. Henry knows, we talked about this even yesterday. Who cried after a game? Like, if you cried after a loss, that means everything to me. Tim Tebow famously cried after every high school loss he had in high school football. That was like 3 times, by the way, in 4 years. He didn't lose a lot. But there's a reason why he was Heisman Trophy, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. It meant everything to him. You're supposed to be emotional, especially when you're at that age, where you're just supposed to care. You're supposed to care. And
Tom Thibodeau is from New Britain, hard-hitting New Britain.
New Britain.
Yeah. My last game, my high school career, which was not much of a career, but I had played with the same 5 players my whole life. My whole life we played basketball since we could walk together. And we started the 5 seniors, we started together. And that last game, the coach pulled me with like 10 minutes to go, and I couldn't finish the game with my seniors. And I cried on the bench. I cried like a baby. We were losing. I knew it was my last game, my high school career. And I've never cried so hard in my life. I have never cried so much. And it was, it was hard. I'm getting like, but like, it meant so much to me, not just the basketball part was not it. It was,
Russell Westbrook wants you to cry right now. Go ahead. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, like, that's the point. In fact, I would give your coach, I didn't cry. I played with 5, there was 6 of seniors. We all grew up together, and none of us cried. I hated our coach. He was just a sadist.
That doesn't sound, yeah.
It was terrible. We lost the district championship in the last seconds on the road to an amazing team that had won the state 2 years ago. It was our biggest rival, and I was just so happy to be done playing that motherfucker. I knew I was going to see my boys all the time. The coach is supposed to build that culture, right? And I do have a funny, quick Adam Morrison story that I think you'll appreciate. It's not just commentators that translate what's going on in a way that I think is impactful. It's scouts and everything too, right? Mark Few told me a story. The head coach of Gonzaga, his assistant kept telling him, "You got to go see this Adam Morrison kid play." I don't remember exactly, but I think he actually was close by in high school to where Gonzaga's campus is in Spokane. And he refused to go. He heard he had long hair, was super skinny, whatever. But he finally agrees to go watch Adam Morrison play. And I was with the assistant coach he called that was telling him, and he calls him, he's like, "All right, I'm here." And he just starts ripping. Morrison doesn't do this, he doesn't get back, all ripping him. And the assistant coach who scouted him 100 times is listening, and then he says, "Coach, but how many points did he have?" It was halftime, by the way. How many points did he have? And Coach Hughes said, "I think he's got 30. Like, yeah, he does a lot of bad things, but the guy was a baller. I think in the NBA, he just blew his knee out, and he could not afford it.
He also couldn't play D.
Well, but it didn't help that he didn't play D, but he was young. None of those young guys played D.
Yeah.
He blew his knee out, and maybe he couldn't have played afterwards. But you know this, when you weren't athletic to begin with, and then you suffer that, and you can't recover fully, you're done. You're done. And he was done. Maybe he couldn't have played anyway, but he was a hell of a high school and college player, that's for sure.
Can we just pour one out? I'm so excited for UCLA. Something broke right for UCLA on a basketball court. I mean, this is a big story. They never succeed in basketball. So. Like, what a plucky underdog. The 11 seed UCLA Bruins finally made it to the Final Four. I mean, who would have thought? That is what a heartwarming little underdog story that is. I want real quick. Amin Al-Hassan and I do these like Wednesday night stereo live podcasts every week. Last night we did it on Tuesday because I'm flying tonight, and we talked about this a bit. Is the thing that Russell Westbrook talked about is championships. I know so many people, he says, that are won championships and are miserable. He's like, I am not going to be defined by whether I've won a championship or not. I know plenty of people who have won titles and it has not delivered them eternal happiness, which is what Ethan Strauss wrote about in his book, The Victory Machine, about Kevin Durant and that Warriors team. That was miserable, but they were winning every single game. Anyway, the fact that like Final Four doesn't exist in the NBA. Like we've never been like, hey, this team or this player went to the conference finals 8 times out of 12. It's amazing they got to the Final Four. We never hear that construct in the NBA because it's all about titles. We hear LeBron got to the finals this many times, but we almost never hear that this player made it to the Final Four. And I wish we had more talk about or more appreciation for how hard it is to get to the Final Four in the NBA. In basketball, in college basketball, we hear it all the time. Maybe it's the one and done tournament or whatever, but it's a hallowed thing in college hoops to make it to the Final Four. In basketball, in the NBA, you almost never care if a team made it to the conference finals. It's almost a bad thing if a team made it to the conference finals and that's the end of their story because it insinuates that they didn't get to the finals, that they weren't good enough to get to the finals. We need to bring the Final Four back to the NBA.
Oh, I've been saying that. Henry knows. I've been asking for a tournament. God, almost since we've known each other. Play some kind of tournament in mid-season, whatever. Just the one and done. I mean, I watched the Clippers Magic last night. And the Clippers would get a nice lead. The Clippers were like the killer whale playing around with a seal. Woo! Have you ever seen that? So, I mean, the Magic have nobody. You recognize Terrence Ross's name. I actually like Tim Birch, but he's not someone you'd think would pull off a win against the Paul Georgeless Clippers. But they just got bored. The Clippers just getting bored. The Magic would come back, and they ended up winning the game. That shit can happen in a tournament. In a one-game tournament with talented players, we would have some pretty exciting things, I think.
Sharks versus Seals.
I'd like to see some kind of event for sure. And just to take Tom's point one step further, yes, I understand the Final Four part for college. My thing is always the Sweet 16. If you can win 2 tournament games, to tell you how hard it is to get the Sweet 16, only 3 teams this year made it for the 3rd straight year. Right? Florida State played Michigan, that was 2. Gonzaga was the 3rd. That's it. Like Duke and Kentucky weren't even in the tournament. Carolina lost first round. It's hard just to get to the Sweet 16. If you do that, you've had a good year. Not a great year necessarily, a good year, no matter who you are. Get to the Sweet 16. You've won 2 tournament games. Give yourself a fighting chance. Fans should be happy with that. No one should ever get fired. Keep making Sweet 16. That's a fantastic year.
Well,
very good.
Denver is a Final Four team last year. Like,
yeah.
You never think of the Denver Nuggets as like, a championship contender or like, did they have a great season last year? If we framed the NBA season as they made it to the Final Four, Denver had an amazing year, but because everything is so geared to finals or bust. Or
I agree with you.
Or bust.
The Clippers know what you're talking about, Tom.
I use that phrase all the time for the NBA, Final Four. I think you're exactly right. If you get to the Final Four, you give yourself a real shot. And what else can you ask for as a fan base?
I also
win
think
50 games plus a year, get the Final Four once in a while. You've done great.
It's like in Premiership soccer, right? There's the Champions League. There's there's the FA Cup. It goes on and on, right? There's so many ways to be champions in soccer. And I think the NBA just needs more things you can win, right? They need more things that people actually get excited about, not contrived things, but like, I think Tom's point, now we'd have 5 Game 7s that might matter in a given year, right? No, more. To get into the Final Four, we'd have 9.
And we wouldn't have Russell Westbrook in this thing, this contrived championship or nothing. You wouldn't have that. And I know it fuels so much debate 2011, you took years off my life is covering LeBron James in 2011. The thought that this guy was flawed. There was something wrong with LeBron James, that he was incapable of winning an NBA title, was what fueled the news cycle and got a lot of us jobs, right, Henry? Got a lot of us jobs at ESPN. Just that LeBron James and this Miami Heat team was a great experiment basketball-wise, but also I think LeBron might be flawed. Like that whole underlying tone of the conversation was, we're rooting against LeBron. We're hating this team. He's never going to do it. There's something wrong with him. He'll never be Michael. And then we realized that was just a bunch of baloney. And I say the collective we, but obviously I did not believe that LeBron James could not win a title. But it's just moronic to think that LeBron James's place in the game was going to be like, we're going to learn any more about this guy, whether someone hits a jump shot or not. Who was it? Yesterday, we were asked the question, like, if LeBron James wins this title against the Brooklyn Nets, will that put him over the GOAT, over Michael Jordan in the GOAT debate? And I'm like, imagine if Dennis Schroeder misses a last-second shot to win the title, and he misses, and that means LeBron James didn't win a championship. Is that going to have any bearing on whether he's better or worse than Michael Jordan? It shouldn't. If Anthony Davis pulls his hamstring in game 2 of the NBA Finals and LeBron James doesn't have his best player anymore, but he loses against the Brooklyn Nets, is that going to make him any worse in the Michael Jordan context? No. We put so much into the narrative of championships. It boggles the mind that, like, we're not that dumb. We're not, as human beings, we're better than this, than to think it's a binary thing. Did he win the championship or he didn't? Because there's 15 players that win a championship every year, and there's about 400 that don't. And I just hate that we think those 15 players are successful and the other 400 players are not.
Yeah, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said in your lifetime. The fact that you think humans are smart enough to understand what you said brilliantly. No. I live in America. I know just how dumb we are, right? I know exactly how stupid we are. And the 30 for 30, the Michael Jordan rule, the documentary that Henry refused to see because he's a mean person.
I'm just holding off. What's the rush?
The Last Dance you're talking about?
I agree. Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
Yeah.
You guys will remember this better than I do because I was busy just getting married and starting my career. But I think the New York Knicks missed 15 free throws in Game 7 the year that I think Jordan may have won his first or second, right? And I'm sorry, Knicks fans, but just seriously, 15 free throws in a last-second game where I think Charles Smith got blocked twice at the buzzer, or Jordan would have not made the finals again. So now we'd have 5 championships. We might have gone 5 for 5, but do we not count that? It's just ridiculous.
I think it is a media problem. I think Russell Westbrook is totally right. I think the problem is that we have to be really, really quick. The popular takes are fast as hell, right? So remember Greg Doyel when LeBron's in his first finals in Miami from CBS? Like, he was doing the LeBron was always a loser stories every day, and he was confronting in press conferences, and people went bananas for it. Not because it was right or evidence-based or interesting, but because it fit a media need to be like, bam, bam, which is like, that's the level of energy they want on SportsCenter. They want you to go hard.
You're right.
Wait, hold on one sec. So every single story in the world about humans is way complicated and will take hours to explain.
Right.
So it's not weird that people want the tabloid back page version of stuff because they're not into basketball that much. They don't have an hour for it, right? But I think we need to remember, so we do. So I think the weird thing about media now is that people who do have the time still give the tabloid bam bam version where it's like, no, I think the truth is LeBron's a complicated character. He's good at this and bad at that. But that just doesn't quite fit the pace of the media that's most popular. So then people just give you something that does fit the pace. I've been on hold before going on a radio show, and they're basically like, hey, yeah, we got to know your take on insert name. Somebody Russell Westbrook's talking about whom I know nothing, right? And I'm like, well, fuck. Now you asked me a terrible question. Right? I'm a terrible person to ask that question to. I don't know that guy, right? But that's the way media works a lot of the time. Not all the time. It's changing a little bit, but.
Well, to transition to Andre Drummond, because Andre Drummond's going to make his debut with the Lakers tonight. And it reminds me of Mike Bibby, 2011, had the worst postseason PER of all time. Miami Heat picked him up off the scrap. I believe he was waived by the Wizards. Mike Bibby was waived by the Wizards and then maybe traded by the Wizards to the Hawks. And then the Hawks waived him, or maybe the other way around. Anyway, 2 teams basically passed on Mike Bibby. And then the Miami Heat said, we're going to take a chance on Mike Bibby. And not only that, we're going to put him in the starting lineup for this championship run mid-season. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We're at practice, Miami Heat practice. Mike Bibby is taking questions from reporters. And we asked Mike Bibby, man, you must be so excited about joining this Miami Heat team. You're going to get open shots for days. And he looks at us and says, I hate open shots. I don't like open shots. It makes me nervous. When I get an open shot, I start thinking and I I don't like open shots. I'd rather a contested shot than an open shot. And I remember hearing this, guys, and I was like, we can actually look this up in Synergy or on NBA.com, like open contested jumpers and the splits. And he was right. Mike Bibby, his career was way better when he had a contested jumper than he had an open jumper. And that was such a foreshadowing of his tenure with the Miami Heat because he couldn't hit an open shot at all. And teams started leaving him open and it crunched down the offense. And Eric Spoelstra could not or waited so long to make that switch for Mario Chalmers until the last game of the season. He made the switch and put Mario Chalmers into the starting lineup. And Mike Bibby finished with the worst postseason PER of all time. He was a buyout candidate. And I say all this because Andre Drummond, Blake Griffin, and LaMarcus Aldridge are in the headlines now because they're with these new title contenders. And what are they going to bring for these guys? And look, it's LaMarcus and all these all-star games. And Blake Griffin, like, look, he looked pretty good for these 2 games. But remember Reggie Jackson last year. Reggie Jackson was, waived by the Detroit Pistons and came to the Clippers to solve their point guard issues. And he was unplayable in the playoffs. Against Denver, I think he played like 6 minutes because Tyronn Lue was, Doc Rivers like, he just can't play any defense. He's terrible. He's terrible on that end of the floor. Did not play. In March, he was a big deal. Buyout candidate in a contender in LA. It was amazing. And then when the playoffs happened, it was like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, maybe Detroit waived him for a reason. I'm not saying that all buyout candidates are terrible. Just remember Mike Bibby.
So wait, the point is that it's stupid for the media to call players losers, but those players are losers.
You got me. No, like I think what happens here is we look at LaMarcus Aldridge and we say, man, that guy was really good for the Spurs a few years ago. Yeah. And we say, what if they plug them into Brooklyn? Man, that's gonna be good. And the problem with Brooklyn is they need defense so badly. Nick Claxton is so much better for that team than DeAndre Jordan and LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. But unfortunately, I think those players, Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge, are going to be trying to play for that next contract, they have an agenda to prove all the doubters wrong, which individually is different than the team construct. And I just worry that the Brooklyn Nets aren't going to get the veggies that they need, which is real defenders. And they're just going to go straight for the candy in Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge.
David, what do you think about candy?
No, I agree with the assessments. I want to add something though. They said this about Kevin Garnett. They said this about Dirk, right? Those guys weren't good enough to win either. But we can all go back in time and pick players out. But I always think about is great teams typically play great. Not always, right? Good teams play good. This is how I look at it. Bad teams typically play bad. But everyone lives in every spectrum during the course of a season. Bad teams play great, just not very often, or otherwise they wouldn't be bad, right? Great teams play bad, not very often, that's why they're great. It's the same thing with players, okay? Someone, Devin, maybe look up Kobe's Game 7 against the Celtics, the Ron Artest game, right? They're going to say he's clutch and he's this, that, whatever. He fucking sucked. It went for him, they might have won by 25 points. And it's Kobe Bryant. He played badly. Now, he didn't help himself by forcing the issue more. That's a different story. But no one lives in one level straight through, except for the really horrible player who only is horrible, but he doesn't make the league. Everyone else can go up and down. The battle is to try to get more levels get above level as much as you can, which lifts your floor by improving your skills, by understanding, by eating better, by getting stronger. That's how you can raise your level. But you're always going to go in every other place, and your team's going to go with you. That's why playoffs of 7 series, you see less upsets because the better team tends to play better more often.
They talk about in like running coach, like track and field coaches talk about steady state. Is that something they talk about in basketball too? Do you know what I'm talking about? So,
no, I mean, I don't use that term, but I same idea. Yeah, for sure.
Steady state is like a heart rate, where you're a certain level of working out, for a runner, it would be a certain pace where you can just maintain, right? So in a race, you'll be at your steady state most of the time, but then you're going to have some key moments where you're going to burn a match, right? And I feel like what you're saying is basically like, the steady state for the good players is going to be higher. Yeah, they've got more weapons to dig it out of a hole, for example. Yeah. That's why I always say find joy in the merry-go-round. They're going pretty fast, and you got to find joy on that. You get bored on that. The Clippers get bored on the merry-go-round all the time. And they can't get out of the hole. They finally figured something. Well, I think 6 in a row.
And then against the Magic, arguably the second worst team in the league, third worst. Houston and Cleveland are really terrible. But Orlando, after what they've done, are right there. And yet they beat LA in LA.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Andre Drummond is going to he's off the court for 7 weeks, and he's going in a national televised game against the Milwaukee Bucks, which are the fastest offense in the NBA.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Like Andre Drummond, here you go. They're just feeding him to the wolves and just be like, yeah.
I don't like starting those guys either, Tom. Teams do this all the time. I think it's a mistake. I feel like you're saying screw you to the guys that have been playing that spot all year.
Well, Marc Gasol,
right. I don't like
it.
Earn your spot, but also get a feel for things. Like I do understand playing them with starters, but you don't have to start the game. Not that I think starting is the most important thing, but there is going to be some hype. It is the Bucks. It is on national TV. Let Andre come off the bench. I almost feel like I talked to a lot of players who really don't mind it coming off injury. Get a feel for the game. Watch how the referees are calling stuff. How they defending the ball screen here. How they attacking here. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, they must know.
Right? Did you write a story about Andre Drummond having like a unique athletic profile? You know what I'm talking about?
Me?
Yeah. Did you write that story?
Yes. P3. He jumps faster than any big man they've ever tested. His bounce is super quick. He's not. He can jump really high.
First bounce. First bounce.
No, second. Like bounce. He just gets up off
the second bounce. Okay.
Right. So. Well, first bounce too. It's just his ability, his springs. He doesn't have to load a lot to get really high.
Wow.
So I found this out that he wins more jump balls than any player in NBA history. Andre Drummond.
It's in tandem, if I remember your story correctly, with like having a great setup so that he's very unlikely to be injured.
Yes. And he played just about every game. He didn't have a serious injury for the first few years of his career, but his mechanics were insane. Like they measured Andre Drummond. They're like, I mean, he's a guard in a 300-pound body, like 6'10", 280 pounds, but he can jump so quick and get so high in like a blink of an eye. And it reminds me of Zion when you watch Zion, where he gets these Z bounds, I call them.
I like that.
He misses a shot, and before the ball falls off the rim, he's already dunking it again. And it looks so natural when you see it. Like, why doesn't everybody do this? I mean, you miss a shot, you go right back and dunk it. And then I realized, like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous athleticism. And Andre Drummond does the same sort of thing. The problem with Andre Drummond is when you ask him to do more than that, where it's not just about jumping around and dunking everything, he runs into problems. His isolation rate and his post-up rate when he tries to go one-on-one and be a 20-point scorer is awful. It's abysmal. And so if the Lakers can figure out how to turn Andre Drummond into a rebounding JaVale McGee and convince him just be a rim runner, set hard screens, and rebound your tail off, that can be a successful player. What I worry about is inserting into the starting lineup right away and getting all those touches here without Anthony Davis and LeBron James. I think it's going to backfire a little bit because he's going to start to feel himself and be like, I want all those touches offensively. Because remember that time in March when we were going against the Bucks and I scored 23 points? Like, I want to be that. I proved I can be that player, and he's going to want to be that player in the postseason to get the next big paycheck.
I think LeBron and AD need to be sitting with a spot open in between. And every time Drummond comes out, they got to sit between them and they just got to say, all right, enjoy it, my man. Because all that shit you're doing is gone. Like, enjoy it. Let's feed you. Have a good time. Woo, have fun. But once we come back, it's pick and roll. You better run your ass to the rim fast, protect us on defense, go after a second shot, whatever. And the first time you dribble the ball, I'm looking at Vogel and giving the signal. And that means you're coming out. We don't want you to dribble that ball, man.
Wait, that's the signal?
That's the Sting. From the Sting? You ever seen the Sting?
Is that a movie?
Yeah, the movie The Sting with Paul Newman and Rob Redford.
Wait a second. What? I'm a very young man, David.
You guys haven't seen The Sting, seriously?
I probably did. I'm too old to remember.
Yeah, that's a wrestler, isn't it?
No. The Sting is an amazing story of just a con, and it is brilliant. Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
Honestly, you can watch it with your kids. I haven't done that, but I'm telling you, I will when they come back for summer. We're watching this thing. It's literally one of the all-time best movies.
My daughter's a year old. She can watch that?
Sure.
Yeah, she wants anything.
She's gonna love this thing.
I bet Henry's good. Yeah. Oh, it's such a good movie.
Did you guys see? I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know if I'm getting pranked, but like there was a thing that went across my screen yesterday, which was like a social media welcome to Andre Drummond, and it had like 8 bullet points.
Yeah,
like,
I saw this.
Like lead centers and steals, and then the 7th one was proficient in Microsoft Excel.
Yeah. was it real?
I don't know.
All right,
I don't want to know.
take back every horrible thing I've said about Andre Drummond. If he's half proficient in Excel, if he can write a VLOOKUP in Excel, he is my.
I can't do it.
Yeah. Dude, Tom, he's going to rate your athletic proficiency soon. He's going to have all your numbers in your.
Did he go to UConn? Is that right?
Yeah. And one time Henry gave me a deadline on a story while we were at ESPN, and it was about free throws. It was about inability to make free throws. And actually, another time I'll tell a great story about the astronaut in that story.
It's a fascinating story. Yeah.
And we were on deadline, and the Hornets were playing the Heat in the playoffs. And I had a deadline on a Thursday, and the Heat were playing the Hornets in a playoff game, big time playoff game on the Wednesday night. And I needed to get a quote about Andre Drummond. Jeremy Lamb played with Andre Drummond at UConn. So Henry wanted to know, and I wanted to know, was he this bad at free throws at UConn, or did he come to the NBA and was like, how good was he in practice? And so Jeremy Lamb and Kemba Walker have an amazing game. Like they hit amazing shots. They're on the road in Miami, and they're just like pouring water bottles on each other in the locker room. They're like going nuts. And I'm like, yeah, all right. So Andre Drummond at UConn, do you remember him taking free throws at practice? I'm just doing a story and wanted to know, was he any good? Like what do you remember him? Like, would you say he's 7 for 10 out of, or like 3 for 10? And he's looking at me like, are you kidding me? We just had the biggest game of our careers, and you're asking me about Andre Drummond? And I was like, yeah, I am. But you know what? I'm sorry. Continue on. I'm sorry. And I just tail between my legs walked out of that locker room. I felt so bad. I don't think I got a good quote out of that, Henry. I'm sorry.
Those guys
go back. Next time we see Jeremy Lamb.
That's a pretty good college team.
When I was I used to write occasionally for children's magazine, right? For Inside Stuff magazine. And the topics would be like, literally, I wrote a story about Rod Strickland loves bowling. This is the kind of thing that you would do. So it means I would have multiple assignments from multiple magazines, though. So I'd be in the locker room, and over here, I'm talking to, Allen Iverson about music or whatever. And then over here, I walked up to Rod Strickland's locker. At this point, he's an older player near retirement. And I'm like, Rod, I have to ask you a stupid question.
That would have been way better if I just prefaced that.
And he's like, oh, please don't. And then I'm like, it's about bowling. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, sure, let's do bowling.
I will always be happy to talk about Rod Strickland, because not only did I coach his kids in AAU down here, but we beat his older son's ass twice his senior year before he went to Wisconsin, including the district championship. I have the video, it's on YouTube, and Rod is in the front row. The front row, we spanked that little St. Pete I team. My son charging the court. Yeah, his sons were very good players. Great, really sweet kids too. Really, I couldn't say anything better about his kids.
Don't challenge them at the lanes, though, David. They're very proficient at bowling.
I couldn't. Wilson's at my feet. I couldn't beat Wilson in bowling. You will never see me step on a bowling alley ever. 20 years at least it's been, and I'm never going back in. Anyway, we have something really good to talk about here. I want to do the Amari thing, but we have to talk about the Blazers, of course, because we are Blazer Central. Well, listen, everybody who watches and listens to the show, like, we fight this every day. I just want to talk about the Blazers. Okay. It's fun for me, but I recognize that's not the point of the show. So every day I just try not to talk about the Blazers, and somebody put it in the document for today. I did.
It wasn't me.
538. Did you see this? Tom had this great look on how defense are guarding Damien Lillard, and basically they're trapping all over the place. So, and what they found is Portland setting ball screens for Damien 29 feet away from the rim. Yeah. No one sets it that far. But I don't know, Henry, if you'll remember this. My guess is you will. I'm reminded of what the Heat had to do in Game 5 against the Mavericks in the finals, when they were picking up Wade super early and trying to blitz him. They were setting screens for him all the way like at half court.
Yeah.
Right now, Dwayne wasn't shooting. The reason why you don't send screens that far out is because it makes it easy for the defense to go under the screen because the shooter won't shoot it from 30 feet out. But Damien will.
Yeah.
Which is why they can keep backing it up and you keep having to go over the top of the screen if you're guarding Damien, for example, because he will pull it and make enough of them if you go under. It's quite an amazing thing what Damien's doing. And I'm writing this week about what I think the NBA might look like in 2025. And this is part of my story is because of all these great shooters, there's just new things that have to happen, or we're going to continue to pull out. And it's something's got to change. Defense have to come up with something different. And I think they will.
Yeah, imagine trying to guard Damian Lillard 4-on-3 in just the paint, right? That's way easier than guarding Damien Lillard 4-on-3 with 400 square feet to cover.
What Riley did was take advantage of Wade's speed. This was Wade in his prime, that 2006 NBA run, where if you just like you said, Tom, in the half court and lower, right, quarter court we call it, it's cramped. But guarding him from 40 yards out, well, not 40 yards, but 20 yards out, good luck.
Yeah.
And then you foul him, which is why he lived in the free throw line.
No, it's because of the refs. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the F5. Do you guys follow the F5 on Substack?
Yeah,
you know
he's
what I'm
told
talking
me
about?
about it,
Yeah.
Who is this genius? I love this person.
Oh, Henry, well, let's talk offline. He is a brilliant guy.
Honestly, I used to have I dream that this would exist, and suddenly it exists. But they have a little chart today of basically like where do teams shoot versus like the norm of the league. And the Blazers chart, it's like it's the little 3-point arc, and it looks like it's on fire. It looks like flames because it has two big flames leaping up.
Here we go with the Blazers again. Jeez. I mean, I thought it was just a cool story about F5, and here you go.
All right, let's get to Amari.
Amari. Yeah. So our friend here on the show, Yaron Weitzman, did a story that I know journalists have been trying to do for a decade, which is like, what's the deal with Amari converting to Judaism? And he spent time with him, and get this. I'm reading a couple quotes. Typically, his days start early. He likes to squeeze in a 6:45 a.m. Talmud lesson before morning prayers, which start at 8 a.m. At 11 a.m., he studies his prayer book in Hebrew so that he can better understand the words he says. At 1 p.m., he studies the laws of the Sabbath. At 2 p.m., he has a second Talmud lesson. He meets with a Hebrew tutor. At 3 p.m., Sotomayor works as a player development assistant for the Brooklyn Nets. So much of this changes on the days when the team is in town and has practice. But even then, Sotomayor will just reschedule whatever study he can for the evening. And then later he says, but I said, doesn't joining a religion of rules and laws also lead to a more restrictive life? I was curious about what someone like him, a very famous person with access to whatever he wants and the world seemingly at his fingertips, viewed as the appeal. Sotomayor says he doesn't see it that way. When I say a blessing, it's like me shaking God's hand and showing appreciation. I'm saying thank you. He created all these beautiful things for us, and we'll just go on and eat the food without even thinking about it. And we'll just go on eating the food without even thinking about it.
He is, knowing what I know about his background, how rough he had it, moving around, playing for so many high schools, whatever.
Florida's tough.
Yeah, no, I'll get to Florida later. I do want to address like the so-called Florida man. His story is amazing, and it's real. It's authentic. We talked to Ryan Pannone, my longtime assistant, who worships Amari, just blown away with how humble he is when he was playing for Jerusalem. Ryan wasn't such a well-known coach initially, and he was just getting like spoon-fed from Ryan, tape after tape after tape. How do I do this better? Working his ass off, but most impressively, was just how he treated the rest of his teammates. None of them had ever made any money in their careers as much as he had made probably in 1 year, in his prime especially. Mm-hmm. And you share, you don't fly charter, you fly commercial. You don't stay in 5-star hotels overseas. You have roommates. He didn't care about any of it ever. Like there was never a time where he just said, fuck this. He could have many times, and he never did. When Ryan took the G League job, Amari said, dude, I'm going to come play for you there. And Ryan's like, you can't. Like, we can't even sign you anyway. But he's like, I just love how you go about things. I love working. And like, it is not fake. It is the real thing. That's amazing. Yeah. And I will tell you this, he's not the first Orthodox Jew I know. I have one in my family who found orthodoxy as a way to, going back to Tom taught me a lesson from Kate Fagan about that nail in the, well, I'll let you tell the story, Tom, but basically that's what's religious for some people. The fact that it is for Amari, a little stranger, he wasn't Jewish. My relative was Jewish like I am. Orthodoxy gave him a center. And then he built a big family and super successful, and they love each other. They're very honorable people. And he thinks Orthodoxy saved his life and gave him a plan. It did the same thing for Amari, who really was from a tornado. But Tom, tell your Kate Fagan story. It's so good.
Yeah, this is All the Colors Came Out by Kate Fagan. It's her latest book, Father, a Daughter, and a Lifetime of Lessons. She's a friend of the program. And we've become great friends over the last few years with both of our parents have been battling ALS. And unfortunately, her father passed away from ALS about a year ago. And she wrote this amazing book. I read it on the plane over here. It's really special. And one of the things she talks about is all these lessons that her dad, who played pro basketball, and she played pro basketball, Kate did, all these basketball lessons that her dad taught her that she didn't realize at the time were not basketball lessons. These were life lessons. And one of the things she will always remember is her dad teaching her about the magical nail on every single basketball court at the free throw line. There is a nail at the center of the free throw line that signals the center of the rim, the center of the court. And her dad told her, when I go to the free throw line and I'm super stressed out about the game, I just find the nail and it calms me down. I take a deep breath and I find my nail and it centers me, right? Both spiritually and just centers in a geographical sense. And she writes about how, in life, you need to find your nail. You need to find your center mark. And so, yeah, in chapter, in the middle of the book, when you find out about the nail as a basketball player, it'll change your life. And it was such a touching story, an amazing book, and you should go read it, pre-order it now. All the Colors Came Out. It's a U2 lyric from Beautiful Day. All the Colors Came Out. And I think, Coach, the nail is a blessing and oftentimes, but also a curse for basketball players, right?
Oh, you bring that up. So basically everyone's taught, you either straddle the nail or you toe it with your shooting foot. In other words, if I'm right-handed, I'm right-footed shooter. And that's wrong. The nail, you're supposed to center your ball on the release, not where you start. But as you're just shooting it, the nail should be dead in the middle of the ball, right? If you put a laser straight up the nail, because that way the ball is already in the hole and you just got to keep it in that path to the rim. But some people toe it, but they shoot from over the side. Some people shoot from the left side, right? Some people straddle it, right? But shoot right from the right side. And so the ball starts out of that path to the hole, like Tom. Tom saw every free throw with his ball outside the rim.
Every one of my one free throws my senior year. 0 for 1.
Yeah, they didn't call you James Harden.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They it would be Steve Novak without shooting ability.
Right.
That's probably more accurate.
Luke Walton, not very free throws.
But yeah, definitely check out this book and make sure you line up your shot on the nail correctly, as Coach points out.
All right, we have a funny tweet, Henry. I hadn't seen it, but I just looked at it now. It looks really good. The goldfish one.
Oh yeah.
Oh hell yeah. Judy, that's way back. Wait, where did it go?
Bobby and Toby.
Yeah. With you can
This
say
is
this.
goldfish.
I can hear this.
Really?
They're goldfish. I always go for the handful. I got about 73 here.
Give me that. I get more than 73.
Bobby, get the vacuum.
Go for the handful.
Pretty good.
He's the best, right? Everyone loves him.
Oh yeah.
He's
I
so
hope he
good.
lives to be 105 years old.
I don't eat chips. I don't eat chips. I eat goldfish, and it's gonna be the death of me. Like I eat so many goldfish because I go for the handful, and I just pour the big box. It's whole grain, so in my head I'm thinking this is healthy. I pour the whole box in my hand, and I just keep going for it. That is my vice. I don't eat chips. I eat goldfish. Great.
Purchasing them for the children, is that right?
Yes, I think.
What is this blue dort thing?
Judy, can we look at that? This is the best. This is the best thing that's happened in a long time.
Play of the week with Lou Dort. Any of Lou Dort is good. I said Lou Dort eating goldfish would be great.
Wow.
Is that
You're gonna
working?
like this. Here we go.
Here you go. I haven't seen it.
Look at this.
Oh, how cool is that?
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander scared of needles, so Lou Dort held his hand when he got his shot.
That's awesome.
Look at that.
Best teammate ever.
Look, it's real. That's like real. I don't think that was for the camera. You know what I mean? I think he's like,
Yeah, that was real.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good for Lou Dort.
The best.
And smart for Lou Dort because Shea Gilgeous is the future.
Keep him safe. Yeah, keep him super safe.
Right, right, that too.
Telling you, best teammate ever right there.
Yeah, no,
That's a great teammate. You want those teammates.
That's good. Do we want to talk about? Okay.
I think we want to talk about Gerard Hector.
Yes.
And I want to we want to talk about the biggest upset. No, we mentioned that. We want to talk about.
We're skipping ahead to the whole Gerard section.
Okay.
We're gonna be short of time. And
Let's
can we
go.
watch? Hello, Gerard.
Hello.
Hey, Gerard.
What's up,
Can we
Gerard?
watch a video?
Hello. Yeah.
Do it.
Oh, okay.
It's been decided. We're adding an Offensive Player of the Year award. Only question is, who should win it? My super complicated formula looks at estimated offensive plus minus, offensive win shares, and offensive box plus minus. No, Bradley Beal, we are not using points per game. Now, before I offend you by not including your favorite player, note that I've kicked out other people who haven't played in at least 35 games. That rules out Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and CJ McCollum. Yeah, I know. It sucks. Here's my list. Number 5, James Harden. So I thought all he could do was dribble. Number 4, Luka Doncic. Dude is 22 years old and he is a monster, and he's making his threes. Number 3, Steph Curry. No KD, no Klay Thompson, no problem. I'll go supernova and go back to 2-time MVP player. Number 2, Damien Lillard. Is he the best point guard in the NBA right now? And number 1, Nicola Yokish. Look, I know he looks like he smokes menthols at bars in Serbia, but every advanced stat and my eyes tell me this dude dominates the field on offense. If you compare the frontrunners for Offensive Player of the Year with the MVP favorites according to BetMGM, there's a chance the MVP could also be the most outstanding offensive player. Look, if your favorite player or your team star didn't make the cut, what can I say? I hate him.
It's so much better when you see me do the Wanda
we had a
vision
video
wing
issue.
and all the cool things.
I
All
think
right, so
your arguments were good though.
yeah, so this is the point though. NBA Offensive Player of the Year. Ooh, it's a
Yeah. Well, so we have a defensive player of the year, right? So why don't we have an offensive player of the year? Let's just add it. The NFL does that, right? They do their MVP and offensive player of the year. Aaron Rodgers won MVP. Derrick Henry, offensive player of the year. We can do the same thing in the NBA, because not every year the best offensive player in terms of my super complicated formula will also be the most valuable. Sometimes they will be, but sometimes it won't be. And I thought it was interesting to look at who would be the mythical frontrunners for offensive player of the year and who are the top 5 MVP candidates according to betting. And Jokic, number 1 in both. And then you got some differentiators, right? Lillard, not really a betting favorite for the MVP. Harden, not really a betting. Oh, he's 5th, I think. So it's interesting to see like the differences between who would win OPOY versus MVP.
who do you want, Tom?
I'm going Jokic. I mean, watching him last night, my mom and I, I was teaching her about Jokic, and she just
Awesome.
she was shaking her head just like, because he would cradle the ball at the free throw line, water polo style.
He plays water
And-
polo, yeah.
Yeah, and he would just like but and the defense is twitching both sides, like they don't know what he's going to do, and then he just like kind of flips it for an easy layup. There's another one where he tapped it to himself 3 times off the backboard. I think he was purposely tapping it off the backboard to get a better angle at the rim for his final layup. It was crazy. He's so talented offensively. Defense not the best, but if I'm getting a vote this year for Offensive Player of the Year, it's going to be Jokic every time.
Yeah, it's just, so all those guys I mentioned, right? They're in the 99th percentile of best offensive players in the league, right? But when you try to figure out who's the best, there's got to be some way you differentiate who is like 0.5% better or whatever. And one of our favorite sites, Dunks and Threes, dude, like he's in terms of estimated plus minus, like He's 2 full points better than number 2. Like, it's like, all right, this guy.
I don't know, Gerard. I looked it up today, though, and on offense, he's actually 99th percentile on somebody else's number 1.
Well, look,
percentile.
that's the one.
We could go with the second best player in the league if you want.
That's the one stat, right? Like the one, the one.
The offensive one. Yeah, it's the offensive one.
If you look at win shares and some of the other stuff, it's like, all right, this guy, he's the good. Man. He's the goods. But yeah, Lillard, listen, Lillard's got the case. You can make that argument. And I'm like, all right, because think about it. Take Dame off of the Blazers, and what are they?
I think CJ is back pretty good.
I think Gerard nailed it. I think Harden is the world's best offensive player right now. But I think Jokic should win that award, and Lillard should be the runner-up in terms of this season, because all things that have happened. But had Brooklyn acquired James on day 1, and James decided to play the way he's playing, and Nash coached the way he's coaching, he's the single most impactful offensive player in the world right now.
Gerard, while we have you, Shams reporting the Nets will move a little bit away from DeAndre Jordan, and the front court will be built around KD, Blake, LaMarcus, and Nick Claxton. What do you make of that?
Like Tom, and looking at stats and numbers, and then also my eyeballs, what they tell me, dude, LaMarcus and Blake, no. Nicholas Claxton is so much better than them. Like, it's not even close. Like, Henry, this is going to hurt your feelings a little bit, but in that Blazers game, Nick switched on to Dame and was able to keep Dame in front of him. If Blake or DeAndre switch on to Damian Lillard, barbecue chicken, as Shaq would say. Like, you're getting cooked every time. Like, you can't have that. Like, you just cannot. So I don't like it.
David, what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I already put in my 2 cents. I was just saying, and the schedule is not going to be helpful here. Is that they're going to ask LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin to play all these games, and I just worry about their long-term prognosis as everyday contributors.
What do you think before Coach goes? We did the LaMarcus press conference yesterday, and we asked them, "What are you going to bring to this team?" Oh, defense and my switchability. I was like, good thing my thing's on mute and my camera's off, because I was laughing my ass off. I was like, you can't switch, dude. We got the tape. Why are we lying? We've seen it. You can't switch.
It was a couple years ago where he was doing pretty good. I don't remember if he was switching or not. The Spurs don't switch that much, but whatever. They're old guys, and I think they should be playing Claxton as much as they can right now and get him reference points for the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
LaMarcus is I think he's a victim of his time too. He was an unbelievable athlete, right? He could run the floor like nothing. And at that time he could shoot, but he just didn't take that extra step back, right? Shoot all these long 2s. And I just feel like,
and we thought he would.
What's that?
You and I talked about, we thought he would.
I thought he would. And Marcus Ald added that much later. Jason Kidd added it later. But
Brooke Lopez.
Like what you want, which we're getting now, are players like LaMarcus Aldridge shooting 3s from the start. Like when you still really can't put the ball on the floor and hammer dunk over people, like that's when it's really something. And I don't know. It wasn't how people played then.
The only potential thing I can see why they're thinking about this is that if they have to play the Sixers in the playoffs, you just need someone who's got a little more size on their body to deal with Embiid, because he's a monster. Like, and Claxton, as good as he is, he's not heavy enough yet, right? Like, he's just going to get broken in half by Embiid. I mean, those guys probably will too, but maybe they can use some veteran tricks, right?
Maybe they can get him out of the paint, right, on the other end.
You're not wrong at all. Like, you want to have flexibility and versatility as you strategize ways to beat the bad guys, right? And so you want to try different things out. You have to be prepared for plan B, C, and D. Plan A, those should be the athletic team.
But we agree it's not DeAndre Jordan. Is that where we are?
Now, DeAndre for Joel Embiid, yeah, sure. You can throw him in again because he's got size. But in terms of switchability, no, definitely not him.
Yeah. You want to be able to mix up your coverages.
Yeah, right. Okay, we have like 1 minute left. Who's got a burning issue they want to add to the mix here?
Well, let's just quickly say Jazz had a scary day yesterday.
They did.
And now Donovan Mitchell's not playing tonight. And if he won't fly anymore going forward, I don't like them on the road too much. They have won 20 straight home games, by the way, the Jazz.
Yeah.
As first reported by Henry Abbott. You broke the story first.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really in tune with with the geese population. So when they like go hide,
The migrant patterns of
When I saw pictures of the engine, I didn't even think about what the red was. And Henry's like, yeah, that was blood from the birds.
oh, that was blood.
Makes
It's
sense.
gotta be blood.
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yeah. That's a wild
Right.
thing. Yeah.
Now I'm
Everybody,
gonna
we
go
won't
get
be
on a
on Friday.
plane. So thanks everybody.
Because
Avoid
of
the
religion
birds,
or something.
Tom.
Friday's a holiday. We're not going to be here. We will see you next Monday with Tom, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
that's
All right.
See you
All right.
guys.
See if we can, everybody. Take care.